Thank you for joining us today. My name is Chris Tremblay, and I am the Director of Operations and the Compliance Officer for Preferred Trust Company. We are the custodian of self-directed IRAs, and today we are going to talk about how we are regulated as a company and how we protect your account and the investments that are held within the account. So the biggest question I always get from potential clients or clients looking to open a self-directed account, retirement account, is how do I choose the company? How do I know what to look for? What sets Preferred Trust Company apart from other companies? And so there are some specific things that we are going to talk to you about today that will help you make that decision. And then once you have opened an account, there are things, and for our current account holders, to know about how we keep your investments safe. So obviously the security of your account is very important to us, and that's the most important part. But there are some specific things that you have to look at when you're trying to pick a service provider, because there are a plethora of companies out there, and they all claim to do this very same thing, but you have to be careful because we are treated differently. Preferred Trust Company is a licensed custodian, so we fall in the first column there. We are licensed by the state of Nevada and regulated by the Financial Institutions Division of Nevada on the state side of things. And so actually what we're going to do, there's actually three different types of service providers. There's custodians, there's administrators, and there's facilitators. So today we're going to talk about the difference of the three and the most important points and differences between the three. So I'm actually going to use this chart and drive you down to the very bottom of the chart first, to look at, I think, what is the most important part of the differences between the different service providers. And that's really how we are regulated on a federal level as well as on a state level. So we are approved by the IRS. That's very important to remember and to think about. As custodian, every custodian is approved by the IRS. Now, administrators and facilitators are not. So really, what does that mean? Well, if you come up to the next one, it says subject to state and federal regulatory oversight. So this is very important. On a federal level, we are regulated by the DOL, the Department of Labor, as well as the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. And we are subject to examination every year, and we are subject to all the federal regulations as it applies to financial institutions. And as you'll notice, administrators and facilitators are not. They are not regulated at all. So it's very important that you ask those questions. On the state level, we are also examined and regulated by, as I mentioned earlier, the state of Nevada. And again, administrators are not subject to that, and facilitators are not subject to that. So very important parts. That kind of leads us up to the next one, which is being allowed to custody assets. So if you are federally and state regulated, that's where that comes in. Then you are licensed to actually provide those services and custodying of the assets, including any investment you might have, from your rental property to your precious metals or maybe even digital currency, as well as the cash while it sits uninvested in your account. So very important. This kind of goes with the titling of your investments and the titling of your account. You might notice that if you currently have an account with us, it is named, entitled Preferred Trust Company FBO for the benefit of your name and your account type. As an example, would be Preferred Trust Company FBO John Doe Traditional IRA. Now, in the case of an administrator and a facilitator, your investments and your account name officially should be in the name of the custodian. So administrators work with custodians. A lot of times you'll have one custodian and you'll have multiple administrators working with a custodian. For Preferred Trust Company, we are our own administrator. We self-administer everything. So we are not sending out any of our work anywhere. All of the paperwork and all of the processing of your account, from the time you open it to your investment and everything after that to maintain the account, is strictly processed by Preferred Trust Company and kept in-house. Whereas an administrator is going to be working with another custodian for that titling and for the taking in of money as well as outgoing funds. A little bit different as far as the facilitator goes, really facilitators, their main role is the setting up, establishing, and maintaining of checkbook LLCs that are owned by an IRA. So they're a little bit different and kind of alone on the end there by themselves. So assist with opening the account and processing the paperwork. Across the board, we do that. Facilitators will from time to time. It really just depends on the facilitator. Processing of the investment transactions. So when you get ready to actually purchase something using your self-directed account, we will be the ones processing the transaction, taking your direction and sending the funds directly from Preferred Trust Company to the investment sponsor or to the title company if it's a property. Processing investment transactions for administrator, sometimes, but usually there should be a third-party custodian behind that transaction because the actual investments are not and cannot be held by the administrator. So very important to look into those things when you're considering a company. And finally, the maintaining of the investments once it's purchased and held in your account. So that's the intake of any revenue, for instance, maybe rental income if you own a buy and hold property, or processing of any expenses related to that cash flow property. Preferred Trust Company handles all of that in-house, and we do it directly. And we have a team of accountants, we have a team and client investment team, and we have a general customer service team. And they all work in conjunction to make sure all of those processes are done straight from Preferred Trust. So there's no outsourcing whatsoever on the part of the custodian. And again, it really just depends. You may have multiple administrators working with the custodian who take care of all of that on their side, but aren't custodying and everything. So there can be a disconnect sometimes between the administrator and the custodian and how paperwork is supposed to be titled, how the investments, the income is handled, how outgoing expenses are handled. So these are very important points to remember. So once you decide on a company and you actually open up your self-directed account with a company, what happens at that point? How is your information protected? How are your investments kept safe? So as I mentioned earlier, Preferred Trust Company is regulated by federal agencies as well as state agencies. We are regulated by the DOL, the IRS, and the Financial Institutions Division, state of Nevada. Now, underneath those federal agencies, there are specific regulations and acts that have been put in place by the federal government that we must adhere to. And I can tell you these documents are pretty thick and they're pretty long, and we are tested on them annually. We are examined on them, and we also educate our staff on them. Our staff goes through heavy training throughout the year to keep up with federal regulations and changes to different policies. So specific to these agencies is the BSA, which is the Bank Secrecy Act. This was really put in place by the federal government to prevent financial crimes and terrorism. And so every financial institution, everyone from your Wells Fargo bank to your Preferred Trust Companies of the world have to follow BSA, and they're tested on it annually. AML, anti-money laundering. So we're talking about everything from check fraud, wire fraud, to identity theft, and everything in between. These are the guidelines that we follow to make sure none of that's occurring on any of our accounts. And any person trying to open an account with Preferred Trust, and the Patriot Act. So all of this is very specific to how we're regulated. Now, underneath these acts, there are specific things that Preferred Trust Company has to do and in order to keep their license. If we fail any of these, we are at risk of losing our license and having our doors shut. So I won't go into great detail on these. Any representative or myself at Preferred Trust Company can go through these with you in detail and make you more comfortable with them. But these are some of the things that fall under the Bank Secrecy Act. The first one is Customer Identification Policy Program. So this is really how we verify the identity of our clients who are wanting to open a new account with Preferred Trust Company. One of the ways we do that is to require that you provide us an unexpired government-issued photo identification. Normally people are providing us their driver's license, military ID, or passport. We have to do address verification at the same time. So you probably probably would be a little bit leery if you're working with a company that doesn't ask you for that. Remember, we are a financial institution, and to open an account, we must verify your identity. The other is customer information security policy. So that's keeping your information safe once your account opens with us. That includes all of your private information, everything from your date of birth, your social security number, your address, your email address, to the actual details of your account, such as your investments, your cash balances, all of that. How do we keep that information safe? We go through very stringent checklists of items that must make sure they are facilitated before we can be examined with a clean bill of health, basically. And then the information technology policy that kind of goes along with the customer information security policy. This is what we use from our computer systems to our servers to how our information is backed up and stored. We adhere to very specific procedures when it comes to the technology we use. And then finally, the business continuity and contingency plans. So this is very important to the actual structure of the building that we house our company in and that our employees work in every day. Obviously, we have to be prepared if a disaster were to happen, natural or otherwise. And so we actually go through training and drills annually. And every time a new employee comes on board, that employee also goes through training of all these different policies and procedures. So every year we go through every particular type of business disaster that could occur, everything from losing our technical part of it to the building itself. And we are examined and tested on that at the federal and state level as well. So these are just a few important things to remember. You can even, now that you know these different terms, you can take them out there. You can ask the different companies, hey, do you have a customer identification policy and what is it? Or do you have a business continuity plan? Is it tested every year? They'll think you're highly knowledgeable if you ask them that. And then you can really be able to determine where you want to put your account depending on what their answer is. So feel free anytime you'd like to give us a call. We have additional information available on our website, preferredtrustcompany.com. You can always email us info@ptcemail.com, or you can give us a call. I'd be glad to talk to anyone. I love compliance. It's what I focus on. And so I'd be glad to talk to anyone if you're interested in opening an account or if you already have an account with us. Thanks for joining us today.